Good afternoon, we are now live.
Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar organized by the FTTH Council Europe. My name is Vincent Garnier, I'm the director of the council and I will be moderating this session, which is titled Smarter, Faster Fiber Deployments with Automation. And this content is sponsored by two of the FTTH Council members, Amdocs and Del Oro Group. I will introduce you to the speaker in a few minutes, but before that, I would like to go through some housekeeping item. If we can move to the next slide, Jeff. The FTTH Council Europe, for those who are not familiar with our organization, is a trade association based in Europe with the mission to promote full fiber network as the most future-proof and sustainable access network technology. We regroup a bit less than 200 members, representing the full value chain of FTTH, vendor, operator, investors, consultants. And part of our activity is, of course, to do lobbying, organizing events online like today, but also in-person event like the FTTH conference we will introduce you to at the end of this session. Now, this webinar, as you will see on the next slide, is a part of a series we're organizing on a monthly basis. The objective is to provide you with insight from multiple variety angle around our industry. In terms of interaction, first of all, I would like to say that you can ask question, and you'll see that on the next slide, Jeff. You can ask question using the question box, which is in the control panel of the platform. Do not hesitate to send us question. We will address these questions at the end of the session. And if there are not enough time to cover all of them, I'm sure our panelists will come back to you. We will forward them your questions. We are recording the webinar and the replay will be accessible. A link will be sent to all registrants at the end of probably the week. And with that, I would like to introduce you to the core of the session on the next slide and explain what we are going to talk about. This session focuses on the design of FTTH network, and essentially presenting how AI-driven software tools can make FTTH network design smarter, faster, and ultimately cheaper for network operators. And to walk you through this content, let me introduce you to our two speakers. Jeff Heinen is Vice President Broadband Access and Home Networking at Del Oro Group, and he will start after my quick introduction, followed by Rob Lemons, Head of Fiber Services at Amdocs. And with that, let me hand it over to Jeff for his part of the session. Jeff, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Vincent, and thank you everybody for joining today. I really appreciate it. Appreciate your time and willingness to join. So my focus here just is to really set the stage, talk a little bit about the trends and some of the nuances of the European fiber market, and just to give you an overall idea of where things are at in terms of fiber to the home and fiber to the building deployments, and you know, just also equipment trends, equipment purchase trends, and you know, just an overall overview of the landscape. So let's talk just at a high level first about some trends in the European market. First, you know, I think everybody is aware that the EU has this fairly ambitious plan for copper switch off. You know, some operators are very well on that road already. You know, through the Digital Networks Act, they are asking or looking for copper switch off from 2030 or around 2030, which was the original date, and now they've recently extended that to 2035, just in you know, with the realization that this is a much larger process, and you're talking about decades and decades of running on copper networks and having infrastructure in place, so it just takes time. The goal here is 95% of fiber coverage required in each of these countries before an operator can do a full copper switch off. So we're talking about a significant investment in fiber that has already been made in many countries and that still has yet to be made over the course of the next decade or so. I mentioned that some countries are well ahead here. Portugal, Spain, and Sweden are just a few of the examples. While we still have some of the larger countries like Germany, Italy, and of course in the UK that are still lagging behind, but certainly already in the process of making that transition. The other thing about the European market that is different from, let's say, North America is that you've got different structural models in terms of how fiber businesses are organized. So you've got more variability in terms of joint ventures. You've got wholesale only access models. And then you have your traditional kind of end-to-end PTT network ownership of the network, the underlying infrastructure, as well as the customer relationship. So that obviously adds a little bit of variability to how you approach the design and build out phase of your fiber networks. What we're also seeing now, after 2022 and 2023, we're seeing just the efforts, right, to continue to pass homes. But now operators are reaching a stage where it's becoming more difficult to actually connect those subscribers and convince them, to make that transition to fiber. In some countries, it's a question of price. In other countries, it's long installation wait times, and because everybody would like to transition over to fiber because of the improvements in reliability and bandwidth and other elements. And then for other countries, and this is the fun part about Europe, where there are different nuances, the perceived value of fiber isn't as obvious. So a lot of different things for the operators to deal with. And so because of that, operators are now shifting from just a pure build-out phase to really focusing on adding customers, converting those homes passed into homes connected. And of course, they're doing that in a more challenging capital environment. There was a lot of M&A activity prior, and now we're seeing that slowed down. Obviously, interest rate increases haven't helped matters from that perspective. Refinancing options when you've made heavy capital investments, those are less obvious. And then, just like in the North American market, there are labor shortages which are impacting both the build-out phase as well as the customer turn-up phase. So, as I mentioned, despite all of those challenges, operators remain firmly committed to their fiber homes passed goals. You can see a number, just a hand selection here of some of the larger ones and what their goals are. Some very ambitious, some not so much. But if you're looking at things, we're really moving in a lot of countries where we have high penetration rates in more urban markets. And now they're moving to more rural markets where just the cost associated with it, the time associated with fiber deployments really become considerable factors. And so when you're looking at how you design and how you plan to distribute your labor forces, those elements become very critical in order to make ultimately a profitable deployment for you. Excuse me. So, our expectations, of course, we continue to see in the European market this transition to fiber, both fiber to the home and fiber to the building. Right now, the majority of subscribers that are fiber-based in the European market are still fiber to the building, owing to the large number of MDUs in a lot of countries. And the goal there, of course, is to ultimately cut them over to full fiber. So there's that initiative underway in many countries. And, by the end of this decade, we really expect to see that the fiber market to be dominant. We've already surpassed, where fiber is dominant in terms of subscribers, and we will continue to see those subscriber numbers eat into more traditional copper, coax, and other technologies. Now, one of the things that I do is track equipment purchase trends, and obviously those should map very closely to some of the trends that we see here in terms of what operators are prioritizing. And you can see, I mentioned the fact that over the last couple of years in 2023 and 2024, we had a change. There was a phenomenal and accelerated build out phase that happened in 2021 and 2022. And as things slowed down, operators had a lot of excess inventory, and this was on a global basis as well. So in some cases, they were adding multiple purchase orders just to go to the front of the line for vendors to ensure that they had the equipment to reach some of their goals in terms of their fiber build out. So over the last 2 years, many operators have been now digesting that inventory and putting that into place, such that our expectation now, beginning, even beginning last year, is that we saw a return to increased purchases in terms of specifically OLT ports. You can see also that the shift in focus on the OLT side has really transitioned over to XGS-PON. So combo optics are being deployed with GPON and XGS-PON. In order not to double count those ports, we count them as XGS, knowing full well that likely they're being used as GPON ports now with a GPON ONT at the end of that. However, the infrastructure and the optics are certainly in place to help make that transition to XGS-PON and to be able to deliver multi-gigabit services in the future. I will point out here also that our expectations for some of the next generation technologies, for example, 25 gig and 50 gig PON, there's a lot of noise certainly around 50 gig PON, but when we talk to operators who have to be very realistic about what they're spending, and certainly in the case of not having a challenging time adding new subscribers, the focus here is getting to profitability. And in that sense, also, they're not seeing significant increases in downstream bandwidth consumption growths or average growth rates. So they can rely on XGS, GPON and XGS-PON through the end of this decade for the most part, and be perfectly fine in terms of the bandwidth they're delivering, barring any unforeseen new killer applications that might come from AI or who knows. So they're being realistic about their investments now, and so therefore our expectations is that we push those next generation technology investments out into the future. And so you can see on the ONT side, I mentioned that we're seeing far more GPON units, and that makes sense. In the markets where there's cable competition, much of that cable plant is still at DOCSIS 3.1. So many of those operators are facing competition where GPON and a 1 gig line rate downstream is going to be perfectly fine when you're competing, when your next highest is maybe a 500 meg service to perhaps a gig service. And so the price points for those GPON units certainly make sense right now. And of course, as we near closer to the next couple of years, we're going to see far more XGS-PON units enter the market as well. So given all that and the current investment levels, some of the challenges that lay ahead for these operators, and I mentioned these at the outset, the supply constraints both from a labor perspective as well as a fiber cabling perspective. Now, keep in mind that with all the data center infrastructure build-outs now, there is a heavy demand for new fiber cabling, both to and within data centers. And so that's putting pressure on companies like Corning and Sterlite and Prysmian to be able to satisfy that demand. And so, they're kind of signing the same type of long-term contracts that they used to sign with the operators with the hyperscalers in order to ensure that they have the necessary infrastructure and fiber cabling in place. But that poses a risk to the operators who do have their own KPIs in terms of fiber homes passed and connected to support. So, you know, until more factories come online to support fiber cabling manufacturing, it's going to be challenging. Of course, I mentioned with higher interest rates, higher capital costs, there are overall higher deployment costs. Labor costs are higher, so operators have to be very smart about how they allocate resources. And again, this is where the design phase really becomes critical so that you can allocate those resources accordingly in the most efficient manner possible. Same is true with permitting and locating. We have the same problem in the North American market, getting permits from multiple municipalities, and the same is true across the board in European markets, if not more so. You know, Germany is always one that's mentioned. Very, very stringent requirements in terms of you know, what you can do in terms of right-of-way access, in terms of street access. So, you know, they're the same type of challenges there. Give operators pause to, you know, really think about how they design and where they focus, you know, their initial build-out efforts. And the same is true then on the fiber optimization, where they place infrastructure. Those phases could also take longer. And again, they have metrics that they're trying to hit, both from a regulatory standpoint and then within their own internal strategies. So again, the design phase, build out phase become very critical as they move forward. So I'm going to hand things over now to Rob to go into more depth about some of these challenges and how to overcome them. So Rob, I'll hand things to you.
And before you do so, maybe a quick reminder that you feel free to ask question to both speakers using the question box in the control panel. Thank you very much.
Well, good morning, good afternoon for those of you in Europe. My name is Rob Lemens, as Jeff mentioned. I'm the head of fiber services for Amdocs. We have been doing this now from an Amdocs services perspective for about 7 years. It started as a very small project inside of Amdocs. We're not typically known for fiber design services, but our business has grown between 6 to 7x in the last 7 years due to the success we've had in the North American continent. Specifically the top tier telco providers, we do something like 2 to 2.5 million homes passed per year in terms of design. And we do that because we have a very large workforce dedicated to fiber, about 1,000 to 1,100 engineers on any given day, working offshore in our India facility where most of Amdocs employees work today for fiber. I want to transition over to just a quick view of what Amdocs is so you can understand from a global scale standpoint why we have the credibility to talk about fiber in a venue like this. We have been working in the telecom space for 30 to 40 years. We come out of a very long engagement in billing and OSS and core network management and network services through a series of acquisitions that happened over the last 10 years that give us a right to play within the mobility network space or access space as it also relates to fiber broadband. Again, a very large global workforce with centers in Mexico and Greece, our massive facilities in India, as well as the Philippines. And we cover pretty much globally an end-to-end consortium of companies from AT&T in the US, our largest company, and really where we were birthed out of early in the life cycle of Amdocs, all the way to the Philippines and PLDT, Globe Telecom, back into Europe through all the different major vendors, Vodafone, and so on. Amdocs has been around for a long time. We're more known for billing OSS, but again, from an engineering and services standpoint within the network services space, we are starting to see a lot of work come our way. The way we really differentiate inside of Amdocs, and this is where I think the key to the conversation lands that Jeff was mentioning around fiber optimization and design efficiency, comes from an AI-focused aspect that we are working to implement and have currently implemented in certain areas of the design process. Obviously, from an end-to-end standpoint, we bring all of our AI capabilities through billing and OSS all the way through design. Some of the aspects of AI are a little more challenging, obviously, and automating some of the things we do have been a little more opportunistic for us. But from a route management, from a quality control standpoint, we're starting to see a lot of automation AI affect the way that we streamline the life cycle from high-level design and fielding out through low-level design and finally drafting. Where we make a lot of interesting improvements in the process is really in the permitting space, specifically in the United States. But obviously, as Jeff mentioned, a lot of the same challenges happen in the European forum that we believe our skill sets apply as well. We have partnerships through IQGeo, NVIDIA, and we think about AI and automation through a large data analytics system that allows us to take multiple disparate areas of data, such as right-of-way information and municipality zoning and utility, and through an AI-driven heavy data analytics platform that we're currently working on, we can take a lot of that data and ingest it and do route optimization based on how we believe the most efficient design can go through an urban landscape or a rural landscape to avoid utility overlay, to avoid right-of-way easement problems that we'd be in the wrong space for. And so we've taken a very manual process, and over the last several years, invested quite a bit of time in finding ways to do a reduction of cabling and trenching, helping customers reach fiber rollout faster in a lot of ways, and designing faster that gets customers to market quicker. When you talk about a lot of the different systems, we also manage end-to-end project management through some proprietary tools that we can help with as well. So what do we do? Our design expertise comes from our optimized operations, obviously, as I mentioned, between 1,000 to 1,100 engineers sitting in India today dedicated to fiber operations. We go from a lifecycle management standpoint of taking the customer inputs around polygon or fiber distributed area they want us to plan for. We do address reconciliation all the way through to low-level design. And because we have a national perspective, specifically in the United States, but applying to Europe as well, we have a consistency of product that really is, in my opinion, unparalleled to any of the competitors we deal with today. And because we have global scale and we have the ability to take all of the capabilities of Amdocs and pour into a fiber design project, we can bring a very fast ramp up of activity to a customer space that allows us to help them move from design concept to an execution space with high quality constructible designs faster than any of our competitors can do today. And we bring our other platforms, our OSS and BSS, to provide what we call Fibre One, which is not part of this conversation, but is very relevant to this, to give a way to handle even telecom stack on the back end and inside core networks from building an OSS that allows us to put our performance management in place, our OSS platforms, our optimized operations platforms in place. So really, Amdocs brings a much bigger conversation to the game than just fiber design engineering, although that's a very strong and relevant part of this conversation. But the bigger holistic Amdocs is a company with $4.5 billion in revenue, very strong financially, and a partner that just isn't going anywhere when the ups and downs of design and fiber rollout occur. You know, what we've seen in the marketplace is really interesting, and this will shock absolutely no one, but it reinforces what Jeff said earlier. It reinforces what we've known now for several years. Everybody's moving to a massive amount of data within their own home space. They need reliable internet. They need upload as well as download speeds that are meeting their needs. And fiber is the driving force for that, or fiber is the architecture that supports those needs. You know, obviously we've surveyed a huge amount of our customer base and across the globe, essentially, they believe that 60% say that cost is the biggest issue. Fiber is obviously coming down from a cost per sub standpoint or cost per home pass standpoint. Obviously, they prioritize speed and reliability, which is obviously from a fiber standpoint where it shines the brightest. They want something that makes a lot of sense from a financial standpoint and reliability standpoint. And while 39% are choosing cable broadband or using it right now, we see those numbers shifting where 31% today see fiber internet as the right solution. And that's only going to grow from there. And that was from a survey we did later last year. So what does that mean from a market forces standpoint? Obviously, every customer needs to get their fiber deployed as quickly as possible, most efficient as possible. What we see in the US, and I'm sure it's the same in Europe, is first to market wins the customer. The market forces around bundling are becoming very important to our customers. The faster they get the broadband out there, the faster they can bundle it with their wireless service where available. They see lower churn, they see higher stickiness. That increases their total cost of ownership. And from our perspective, the entire aspect of making sure that works is getting quality done the first time. We don't look for rework. We minimize any chance we have of having to send a design back for anything to be redone by our India team, because those little errors that we see within a design space can have very, very large impacts when it comes to a construction standpoint, when it comes to a permitting standpoint. The charges that we see for permitting reapplication are enormous sometimes. The amount of time going back to the end of the queue becomes a real problem for customers. And so quality, specifically as it relates to our automation capabilities, is our primary focus when it comes to how we design our fiber designs, bringing time to market to the top of the chain. We see around 5% of a build is used in terms of budget for rework. Our goal is to drop that, which goes back to making sure quality is done the first time. And again, we try to minimize our overrun, which the customers prepare about 7 to 15% of their budget and their schedule to manage that overrun for rework. As I mentioned, so first movers really do reap the windfalls of this, and that's why design quality and design optimization is so important. We see 30 to 50% market penetration in terms of growing their market share before others enter the market. As I mentioned, reduced churn, higher quality leads to quicker stickiness, and the customer is accepted and kept on the network. And along with that, because of cross-sell opportunities of bundling, increasing ARPU, increasing other services that are related to fiber, TV, and so on. But it has to be implemented correctly. We really do believe that the highest quality and the higher capability of doing strong design packages and strong permitting packages allows that operator function more efficiently. And because of our work within the North American space, our largest customer, AT&T, their third quarter earnings reported a massive amount of execution, strong strategy execution. 41% of their AT&T fiber households are actually choosing mobility products at the same time, which is exactly the strategy they wanted to implement. They were looking for 15 to 20%. They've seen actually a doubling of that in terms of bundling and service capabilities that they can offer their customers. And it's turned out to be a very lucrative move for them. So when we talk about automation, Amdocs is investing heavily in the AI space, specifically in agentic AI. And where we used to take automation from a very static infrastructure, we take it to a more adaptive infrastructure, where agentic AI plays the major role in how we think about automation from a services capability. Instead of script-based skills, which are very valuable, we go to more of a cognitive workforce. And we are upskilling and taking our AI capabilities to the very top of the chain in terms of our priorities internally at Amdocs and how we offer our products into the workforce and the marketplace today. From a linear speed model, we see exponential velocity as we implement our agentic AI approach. And obviously from reactive to predictive intelligence in our operations space, knowing what's happening in the network before it actually happens and responding appropriately and proactively to the customer when we see something going on. Now, we do that really from three different aspects. We went from an assistance where the human is interacting with an agent to an augmented force where the human is acting with multiple agents and giving the AI with suggesting actions executing, to now we're moving to a supervised agentic capability where AI actually operates independently, collaboratively with other agents. And we're seeing a real interesting uptick in the way the workforce uses this model and trying to find ways to implement this in different ways where an agent doing design is working with an agent on permits. And we're getting to that point where human involvement is extremely low and we can move from a manual perspective to a more automated perspective much quickly. And it's happening very, very interesting with our workforce. As I mentioned, 1,000 to 1,100 engineers in India, all working together and using agentic AI creates an amazing amount of velocity within the automation capability and quality control space that we hadn't seen in previous years. So within the agentic process, our traditional flow was really working from a standard spreadsheet and project management through standard permits to surveys and permitting, which is still mostly the case today because most of the municipalities have embraced a less manual process. But then it comes back to design, our print validations, our quality control efforts, and finally our invoicing and inventory systems that are all AI driven as well. And you can see that through the end-to-end workflow automation we talk about below, where we're integrating our systems in terms of project management into our planning and engineering services, finding our BOM automation for pricing, very valuable to the customer, integrating our mobile apps that we've developed for our field mobility teams into simpler red lines and workflows we can work through design, construction tickets, and finally into the automated invoicing and provisioning updates we work as those tickets are being completed. Agentic AI really approaches every aspect of the life cycle from end to end, and it's just in the very beginning. What's exciting about it is we've just started this journey, and it may feel very fundamentally different now, but it's actually becoming more normalized every day that we continue using this, and we find new ways to add value as we move forward. I'm going to try and move to the next slide, and for some reason it's getting stuck. Vincent, do you want to kick off the demo video?
Absolutely. Let me play this.
When it comes to fiber deployment, every second counts, and it's the first provider to launch who wins market share. But complex design decisions, delays securing permits, and unexpected field challenges slow things down. So how can you accelerate deployment while controlling costs? Amdocs Fibre Solutions has partnered with IQGeo for automated design. With NVIDIA Omniverse, providing infrastructure mapping and pathway simulation. Here's how it works. In step 1, Amdocs Network Workflow Management provides a single, unified resource for project management with automated workflows producing seamless task handovers, accelerating approvals. In step 2, we use IQGeo to define service area boundaries and automatically generate high-level plans. Our experts then analyze these plans and recommend refinements to optimize coverage and reduce build costs. Our system then performs automated address validation against multiple data sources. In step 3, we partner with NVIDIA Omniverse to identify existing infrastructure to simulate optimal pathways. Here, you can easily see the easements, copper, above-ground utilities, poles, and their attributes. The system then analyzes infrastructure conditions and environmental obstacles to guide engineers toward the most efficient fiber paths. In step 4, we employ IQGeo's automated platform to create the low-level fiber network designs, ensuring precision and efficiency. The system then applies predefined integrated rules to streamline design activities while maintaining accuracy and scalability. In step 5, our proprietary process auto-generates required permitting documents, making it simple to file your permits. At the end of the process, the construction engineer receives an optimized data-driven plan, ensuring faster market entry, lower costs, and a smarter way to deploy fiber. Ready to accelerate your network expansion? Start planning with Amdocs today.
All right, thank you for running that. As I mentioned, we take automation, the agentic AI process extremely seriously. We're employing it across all aspects of what we do in terms of design through fiber, permit design, and finally construction package handoff. So we see a really interesting market in terms of what Amdocs is providing today in the US specifically, but also as it relates to Europe, and looking forward to growing that market as well. Vincent, I think we're ready for any Q&A at this point.
Absolutely. Well, thanks very much for this presentation. So yes, I see some question coming up concerning the slides. Yes, the slide deck will be shared with you after the event, together also with a link to the replay. So no problem with that. And maybe first question to both of you. Recently, we've seen example of network operator terminating contracts with construction firms for not reaching build milestone. Do you see this as a growing issue? Can operators what can they do to make sure that it doesn't happen?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Yes, I do think it's going to continue at the moment. Specifically to the U.S. is where the prime example comes from, and what happened between two firms here. There's a conflict right now between speed to market and the capital space, the amount of capital being allocated, and the permitting, specifically the permitting issues that we see in specific municipalities. And when a construction firm reaches those construction permitting requirements and they get stuck, or they have a problem with getting those permits through, they can sometimes have a massive amount of rework come up. So we saw this with another customer. We weren't involved in their design. They were using a kind of end-to-end firm that had both construction and design capabilities. And because of their struggles in that market, it created a massive amount of delay that caused from their investment backing a real delay in what their milestones were going to be. And I think as long as we have difficult permitting environments, which is just the nature of the beast, and you're not using a system or a designer that understands the real intricacies of not only the municipality, but what works from an automated design standpoint, what is best practice when it comes to a permitting standpoint. I think some construction firms look at design as a necessary evil, and they try to bring it on because the real top line revenue is construction, and they may shortchange themselves on design quality. I'm not saying that's what happened in this case, but I do believe some firms struggle with that. From our perspective, the design is the most important element, because if you don't get it right, the rest of the downstream aspects of a construction project also struggle. And so design needs to be taken as the top priority, and that's why we focus on automating and specifically around quality control. So we remove those roadblocks, remove the rework, and actually get the permitting done quicker. So until that model of end-to-end or all-in-one construction design starts to give way to dedicated engineering workforce, I do think we're going to see that struggle for quite a bit.
Okay.
If I can add something really quickly just here, Vincent. I remember really a really interesting conversation I had with a network construction firm, and the CEO told me, he said, construction firms don't die from starvation, they die from overeating. So this is where it becomes so critical, regardless of the location, to manage and have a very smart everything laid out before the design phase begins, because and have KPIs with the construction firms readily available and clarified from the get-go. Otherwise, these things will continue to happen. So this is why I think a solution like this for operators, especially as they're moving from the higher density builds in urban markets and suburban markets, and now they move to the exurbs and more rural areas, this is where that becomes even more critical.
Sure. Thanks for both of you. Another question: can the solution work for metro and LH networks, which are more ring or stretch based?
Look, from our standpoint, the design aspect is agnostic. The design work is agnostic to whether it's ring, data center connectivity, rural deployment, metro deployment. It really makes no difference. We've done almost all of those solutions through our process. So the workforce itself is capable of doing all of that work. There may be small, minor aspects that are different when it comes to design of those, but in general, we're fairly agnostic. So our standpoint from end-to-end design through permitting, it handles basically any situation that the customer brings to us.
Okay, makes sense. I'm reading another question coming up. With Amdocs automated deployment, what about mistakes in the original plans, which could produce wrong planning, even via the IQ Geo tool?
Sure.
And we require manual verification, or?
Well, certainly we try to do as much fielding up front. So when we get a DA or a design area from a customer, they want to do an overbuild in a certain neighborhood, they give us a polygon to say, figure out the design to connect to my existing network. The most, and a lot of customers will, a lot of design agencies will simply do a Google desktop, do a very high level design, run that out, and then try to work off the details from there. In our model, we spend a little extra time in the field. We make sure that what we see in the field is validated. We may do a high-level desktop design, but it's always validated in the field, so we get real-world access to what's changing. We've seen instances where that doesn't happen, and all of a sudden we're trying to design fiber through a swimming pool or through a right-of-way that nobody knew existed. And so it's important that you find a balance in that. It's a little harder to automate that, but the automation comes from sending a good design, a not perfect design, but a good design out to the field. Fielding then becomes a checklist of, does this work? Is this correct? Are we in the right spaces? It's not a how do you design it, but what aspects of the design do I need to watch out for? And so again, it's another quality check. And we try to automate our quality checks to a point where we can go out to the field and do that. And so back to the original part of planning, I think planning becomes, exercise in strategic goal setting. Let's go do that area. And if you have a good design firm that can take that from there and exercise their due diligence and put their quality controls in place, you can overcome even some bad planning errors depending on how significant they are. We can work through that through a strong design phase.
Thank you. Are there components of fiber builds that almost always take longer and cost more than operator typically factor for? How do you see pattern in the variation between design and operation?
It's absolutely in the permitting phase. There's zero debate on what's the hardest part of a design or construction phase. It is absolutely permitting. As Jeff mentioned, the permitting systems are very cumbersome. Some areas are better than others. What's absolutely imperative is that you have a design firm that knows those local municipalities and has a dedicated design and permit capability. Permitting in a lot of cases is seen as just the necessary evil and the afterthought of design. I would argue that it is the most important aspect. Nothing happens without the permit, so we have to spend an enormous amount of energy making sure that part is right, or else we get stuck in rework. We get stuck in long queues for reapplication. And we see it time and again that permitting the municipalities continues to be the biggest sticking point for us. Jeff, do you have any feedback about that? You agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, across the board, the biggest challenges, and we see now a cottage industry, at least in the North American market, of very localized companies just to handle the permitting process in specific municipalities. Because maybe they work there at an ILEC or an operator, and they know the ins and outs of the process, or maybe they were a lobbyist prior to that. But yeah, I think there's always people in the industry are very good and adept with the technology, and then when it comes to the regulatory aspects, regardless of location, now this is in Europe or whatever country, the process of permitting and getting approvals always takes incredibly long. And so even when I build my equipment forecast, that's a function that's, I mean, it's hard to build into, what vendors say they're shipping. However, invariably when you talk to operators, they'll say, look, if we could pass more homes, we would, but we can't because of the permitting process. It's not due to lack of having equipment on hand. Sometimes it's due to lack of labor, and we've talked about that. But in many cases, it's more due to the fact that the process of getting approvals, and this was very true, and still to this day, when you had all this money coming in, especially right after COVID, to improve bridges, improve infrastructure. Well, all those permits go to one location, and they all have to be approved by one person or a group of a few people, and that includes right-of-way access, and it just gets bogged down. And it's improving, certainly in some instances, but it's never going to be a perfect mechanism by any stretch.
And actually, I have a follow-up question on the topic of permitting. Do you somehow help monitoring and streamlining that process? Is there anything your tools are doing to take into account permitting stage and these hurdles?
Yeah, at the point right now, the best we can do is put it within our automated project management system and milestone track it and make sure someone is doing the follow-ups. I mean, once it enters the process inside the municipality, it's really out of our control. We do the best to provide the best possible permit package application. We will monitor and follow up. We use local resources to be there hand-holding the municipality and trying to push through, but it's still a very in some cases bureaucratic and manual process, in which case once it enters the municipality itself, it's all about where it is in their queue, who's doing the work on it, and the only thing you can really control is giving the best shot at the best form of data and making sure that rework and reapplication are required, because once it leaves and gets sent into the system, at least in the United States, it's very out of our control once it enters that process.
Understood. And another question, which I find quite interesting, Graham is pointing out that the final few meters of fiber installation into the customer home represent a very large portion of the budget for rolling out and until full fiber adoption. So is there any tooling automation that you're offering to make that, to reduce the complexity of that challenge for the last connection to homes and premises?
Yeah, they're actually, it's a really great question. It's very relevant because with a major customer in the United States, they presented us a problem statement that said, look, when we have our technicians roll out to the site to do the last connection to the home, sometimes wherever the final connection has been laid in the ground near the home, sometimes it's been sodded over with grass, there's landscaping in place, and a technician will literally spend sometimes hours looking around, poking around for the right place to pick up that fiber and bring it all the way up to the customer premise. Very problematic, and they've asked us to see, is there any automated tooling we can put in place? From a labor standpoint, it's interesting because this customer has technicians that they do the core network up to the handoff point, and they have different technicians under a labor contract that do the connection up to the house. So this is kind of specific to that labor situation where one person can't talk to the other because of the labor contracts. What we do is, because we work across end to end, we have access to data, and we're actually building a tool where we take that data and present it to that premise technician in a way that allows them to find the fiber faster. They reduce their rollout time. They can get more customers done during the day. I think right now their goal is 2 to 3 customers hooked up per day per technician. They're looking to get to the 4 or 5 to 6 customers per day, so they can, stop having to hire new technicians and lower their workforce costs. So yes, because we as a design firm have access to that end-to-end data, we can help them find ways to get that data to their technicians where it's relevant and keep them more efficient when they get to the field. So it's actually a really interesting tool, because that problem statement has literally come up in the last 3 months that we're working on.
If I can just add something, in the European market, where there is a heavy preponderance of fiber to the building within MDU locations, and the strategy for most operators is to ultimately convert those to full fiber directly into apartments and other dwellings. That's going to be extremely critical. I mean, all the operators chose the fiber to the building architecture for a reason, and it was cost, getting approvals from building owners, disrupting tenants, all of those things that have to be factored in, not only on the single family, the single family home issue where you're dropping the feeder fiber to the side of the house, but now you're talking about older buildings where there might be minimal throughway, either through an elevator shaft, if that, or stairwell or something like that. I mean, the challenges are going to be massive, I think, for getting full fiber, especially throughout some of those European FTTB markets.
Thank you. Another totally very different way of looking at things. Question on data privacy, which is arguably a most maybe more stringent element in Europe than it can be in the US. So how is your system dealing with the requirement for data privacy?
So two ways. One is, as I mentioned in the beginning, Amdocs is a billing and OSS software company first. That's where we got our genesis in the network space. And so anytime a company deals with billing and the sensitive proprietary information of a customer that sits inside of that billing space, massively protected from any kind of internal or external threat to that data. And so, I think it's interesting that as a design firm, we back up into a very security conscious apparatus that deals with billing data every single day at mass scale. And so privacy is very concerning to us, and we take it very, very seriously, simply because it's a requirement of the billing system itself. But I'll segment that a little bit. When it comes to different customer data, we make sure organizationally that we don't have competitors worried about their data accidentally leaking to another customer simply because we have designers that work on similar programs. We try to make sure, and we do make sure, that within our sales organization and our execution organization, that we wall off the customer from other teams working on competitive spaces, to make sure that data can't go back and forth accidentally through cross-pollination of the designer doing multiple customer work. And so we do take that very seriously. We put safeguards in place to make sure that data doesn't leak across.
Thank you. Let me see the next question. It's also about specificity of the European market, especially with this open access model with many operators being wholesale in relation with ISPs. Is there an impact of this diversity of operator model on the way you leverage the capability of your tool?
It's really not a difference in the way we handle it. Again, we're agnostic. We do a wholesale model in the US as well, where we manage operators that ride across the wholesale as well as the wholesale design itself. And so from a fiber engineering standpoint, incredibly the similar process. We're not really doing anything different, and we're agnostic to the way it's wholesale versus retail. In the European space, I don't know, Jeff, if you have any information on how that might differentiate between the wholesale and the retail?
Well, I mean, I think I can't speak to the tool itself, but obviously within the market, it's something that has to be factored in, and I think it's there are, I think probably the relationship, the nature of the relationship, and who owns the tool and who owns the right to manage the KPIs and how the construction and design phase gets done is different when you have multiple entities. But I think, in the North American market where I've encountered this and had discussions, it's pretty clear. When there's a wholesale infrastructure owner, they take ownership from end to end of the construction and design phase, because that's what they're good at. They're not good at being retail ISPs. They know that. That's not their business model, and they take hands off from anything that's layer 3 and above. That's just not their purview.
Okay. And maybe one of the last question, also maybe mostly concerning the European situation. This is about copper switch off. You mentioned in your introduction copper switch off, but from an operational standpoint, it's not an easy process for an incumbent operator to transfer and switch off, decommission copper and move everything on fiber. So how does it translate into the type of service you can offer to these operators?
Well, from a copper transformation standpoint, similar to what we're doing in the North American continent, it's a very complicated process. Everything from designing the actual copper removal to, in some cases, the entire central office infrastructure being taken out, consolidated, compressed, collapsed, and finally potentially resold, scrapped, or reused in some way. The model that we're seeing most relevant to that we have a lot of excitement around is kind of a territory management model. So rather than a company coming in and saying, I want the high profitable work of doing design across your copper infrastructure and telling you where to take the, how to get the copper out, how to design movement of workers or active circuits between one cable to another as you consolidate and collapse those or remove the cable. We're starting to look at a territorial model, and one of our customers has asked us to do this, where we take a entire geographical area and say any of the central offices within that space, regardless of the work required, from the high profitable design work to the low profitable scrap and reuse resale environment, and take it holistically. So at the end of the day, you build a business model that becomes more of an investment with the customer and a long-term ROI model to gain access to everything within a territory. So you do the high profitable along with the low profitable, but at the end of the day, you end up with a business that is right in where you want as a business, in the right profitable area, and you make it easier for the customer. And that's really where the model that we want to embrace. It's a very complex thing to move customers, and it's very disruptive, and there's always going to be customer complaints about it because of the disruptive nature of the business. Our job at Amdocs, at least my mission, is to make it as easy on the customer as possible. So at the end of the day, they can move that infrastructure out. They can take their CapEx and start focusing on their go forward market opportunities and not their OpEx centric and possibly lagging opportunity or problems they have to deal with. We want to take the entire territory and partner with them to help drive customers into the right products, your catch products, take that equipment out where possible, remove that copper, help them recycle and reclaim value out of it, even down to the real estate level if we can, and finding ways to monetize that for the customer. So we think big picture and holistically about that, with the effort of trying to make it as easy as possible, even given it's such a complex environment.
And I just think the requirement in Europe for having 95% fiber footprint before you can get approval and even begin that process of thinking about switching off copper facilities, that is going to make things really complex and time consuming. Everything's going to have to be verified. Every customer is going to have access to the same level of service that they did before over fiber facilities that they did with copper. And that process, we're seeing blueprints of that in the North American market with operators that, they still have to go to each municipality, and we talked about the challenges with the permitting process. It's yet another process to get the approvals, right, which are essentially another permit to go ahead and switch off your copper facilities at that point by making sure that the customers have access to what they had before. So it's that, they're going to need tools to make that process easier as well.
Well, thank you very much. I think that will be the last question. There are still some questions coming in, but I will forward them to you guys, and you can follow up with the participant. Just want to finish with a few words on the fact that I think you will be joining us in London and exhibiting and maybe speaking in some session at the FTTH conference next April in London, correct?
That is correct. So Amdocs is a silver sponsor of the event. We'll have a booth. We'll have presence with our local European team, and we're looking forward to meeting anybody that comes out to the conference.
Absolutely, we'll be very happy to have you part of the sponsors of the conference, and I'm inviting every participant to this webinar to join us as well in London. You can find on the FTTH Council website a link to registration for the conference. So with that, I just want to finish on time. So thank you so much, both of you, for very insightful presentation and discussion. Maybe I give you the last word to conclude.
Yeah, thank you again for your time today. I know this is a very interesting topic, and everybody's got a lot to do. So making some time out of your day to listen to us, is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time and attention. I really appreciate it, and hopefully look forward to meeting some or all of you in London next month. or in 2 months, excuse me.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And there will be, of course, other webinar more or less on a monthly basis, so stay tuned. Thank you so much for attending this session. I wish you a good rest of your day. Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay.